We are live. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes and we're getting started. Let's let everybody know that we are live in the chat room. I should at some point turn some lights on, because it usually makes a difference when you're doing a show. Otherwise, it'll look like this. It's just creepy. Hi, welcome to the study group. We need to have something that's a little bit nicer than that, a little bit more welcoming. So I've already got it set up. So turn on all of the outlets immediately. Go. And look at that. We're getting light. Now let's look at the difference. See? I'm kind of off here. I'm off to the side or something. There's a thing going on there. Let's see how it looks on the other cameras. Let's see how it looks here. Yeah, it's off to the side just a little bit. Just a tad. Just a skosh. Can I deal with it? Can you deal with it? I don't know. Who knows? We'll figure it out. Cameras look good, though. Let's do an audio check, shall we? Let's do it in a different browser, because I can. /live, and let's press a button and see how this sounds if I am playing a thing and browser, because I can. Well, that sounds /live, and let's press a button. That sounds pretty good, actually. That sounds a little better. I tweaked the audio just a little bit, so it'd be a little bit above where it used to be. Well, let's change the website. I've got Vocal Zone stuck in my cheek. That's what all that noise is. Sorry about that. Okay, let's change the website banner so that it says that we are live. My study group is right now. Click here to join us. And let's shift everybody over to /live and reset the cookie and click the save changes. Let's see what Socrative is doing. Let's see what it says. If I go to Socrative, SOC, whoops, that's the teacher app. I need the student app. Student, I'm a student. Room name, Professor Messer. Join room. Yeah, it shows something. It's working. It's there. What else we got going on? What else? Blah, 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 blah. Nope, it is definitely there because I see this. There it is. So it is up and running. I need to get rid of all these bookmarks. There we go. That looks nicer on the screen. Give me a little bit more real estate. I need real estate on my screen. I updated my Chrome browser, or I should say it updated itself. Thank you, Chrome, for that. And reset all of my zoom. Every single zoomy thing I've got going on, every screen, because I'm running at, what resolution am I running at here? I'm running at a resolution. If I look at my displays, both of them are running at 1920 by 1080. No, that's not true. The one in front of me is doing that because it's 1080p. Normally I run at 2560 by 1440. And everything is zoomed up so I can see everything. And for some reason, they reset all the zoom. I'm sure there's a perfectly good reason why they did that and screwed up everybody's zooms. Okay, the tweet went out, which means the email went out, which means the Facebook went out. Gosh, we should get going here. I should probably get rid of this Vocal Zone. I even checked my Socrative to make sure that everything was in the proper order this time. I know. It's crazy. But that's how it goes with me. Ba-ba-ba. What else? We need to check the thermostat. What's that doing? We'll just leave that there for reference. What else? Is that it? Are we just ready to go? Is that how we're going to go with this thing? All right. Okay. All right. I still think that's kind of skewed off to the... See, I can't leave well enough alone. I have to change the camera now. Where can we put preview on? Let's put preview right there. Such a small change makes such a big difference. Yeah, I like that better. All right. Yeah, that's nicer. Now, here we go. I like my phone case. Does it hold driver's cards and other credit cards? It could, but I tend to lose more phones than I do wallets, so therefore it does not go in the phone. But it certainly would. This is the book, because it looks like a book, because it looks like a very faded book. Let me do this. See, here's the book. It kind of, when it's new, it really does look just like a book. It's got a little place for this, and then you can see. And it does have place for things to go in there. That's where my parking tickets, not the tickets, but when you go to a parking lot, you take the ticket so you can park, not a citation. I don't plan to have a certain phone case because of the number of citations I get. If I did, I would have bigger problems than the case. Are we recording? Yeah, we are. Those look good. Those look good. We got like a minute and a half. We're doing this thing. Okay. I really do need to get rid of the vocal zone then. All right. There is no easy way to get 50 hours continuing education credits for Security Plus. I guess there is. You can go to a training class. You can take college courses. Those are little huge chunks of credits that you can get. You attend to trade show, those types of things. But generally, it's a lot of little things. Or just take a higher level certification, or take a different certification and apply those back. That would be a good way to do it. You got 3 years, going to take another certification course in 3 years, right? Right. What is this, Network Plus? That's good, because all the stuff I wrote was for Network Plus. It's kind of warm. Let's make it that cold and see how well this goes. I'm sure it will be fine. All right. Okay. What else we got going on? Oh, we should start this thing. What am I talking about? It's time. We should do this. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2016 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is my live study group I do once a month where I ask you questions and then you answer them, and then we see how we did. This is something that I like to do thanks to the folks that are supporting the website. We I have a lot of you that are already live on the chat room. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can also find a live chat that's available on professormesser.com/live. If you're not watching this live, then obviously you can't participate in answering the questions live with us, but you can still follow along and see how you do. We'll have all the questions up on the screen. I'm able to do this thanks to your support of the website and the Network Plus videos. You can find them at professormesser.com/getnetplus. We'll show you the offline version of the videos. Of course, all of my videos are available to watch for free online. So every minute of every video is out there, which makes it easy. Of course, you can also follow what we do. There's a daily Network Plus pop quiz, for instance, on Twitter and Facebook and Google Plus and via email. You can find out more about that at the Professor Messer website or professormesser.com/Twitter/YouTube, etc., etc. Also, don't forget about your 10% discount voucher for any of your CompTIA exams. You can find it at professormesser.com/vouchers. I mentioned there is an offline version of this. Your support of the website and watching the videos helps. Some of you would like to have offline versions of this, and they're available to purchase as well in 1080p high definition. They're audio files that you can also purchase if you just want something in the car when you're going back and forth to work. And my course notes, and I'll talk more about the course notes in a bit. You can find out about all of those again at professormesser.com/getnetplus. The chat room's already talking about how do we answer these questions that I'm asking. Well, I've got them right here. Here's the instructions for you. If you are watching this live, you can participate interactively by going to Socrative.com, clicking on the student login, and going to room Professor Messer, PROFESSOR MESSER. Make sure you spell it right, or you will not be able to get there and be able to make all of those answers that you will ultimately be answering with the questions that I have for you. There are also apps that are available. There is one for the iPhone. There's one for Android. There's one for Windows Mobile. There's also a Chrome add-on that you can get if you're running Chrome. So there's lots of ways to do this. You may just find it easier to pop open a new window and just go right to Socrative.com. And if you do, you will see this question: how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification? And that is indeed the question that I have. What I'm able to see on my side is you answering these questions. So I get to see that, for instance, you can say it's been less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 months to a year, over a year, or 23% of you already have your Network Plus certification. So this is great. I'll be asking questions. I can interactively see as you're answering these. I don't know who's answering what. This is all just sort of rolled up. I don't collect anybody's names or information from this. That's not the point of this. The point is to be able to see how well you know these Network Plus questions that are coming through. I'm also, after the first hour, we'll be taking questions on the phone lines and from the chat rooms. That might be another thing you might want to look to do, is ask a question after the first hour. So make sure you go through that as well. If you are watching this for continuing education credit, sometime during this first hour, I will be giving you a special code word, and I'll tell you exactly how to use that code word to get the 1 hour of continuing education credits. As some of you are aware, the Network Plus certification is currently the version N10-006. That is the code or the version number of the exam. So anything that you're studying from should have N10-006 on it. If it does not, you need to make sure you get some updated study materials. This has been out and released since February the 28th of 2015. So really, it's been out for over a year now. We're looking at May right now. So you've got at least 2 more years, probably a little bit more than that, before this exam will ever think about changing. So from that perspective, if you're studying, you're wondering, is any of this going to change? You've got years to go before there's any chance of any updates to the Network Plus certification. So sometime in February of 2018, we might see an update. And then later on, we'll, of course, be able to transition out this version to something else. For those of you that are watching live or watching or wanting to watch any of these on the replay, these are immediately available to watch after the study group is over at professormesser.com/live. And ultimately, I archive it to my website so that you can go to the categories on my website and look at my A+ study groups or my Security Plus study groups or my Network Plus study groups, and even look at all of the previous study groups as well. Well, with that, Let's see. First, let's have a look at the answers you did. 36% of you watching less than 3 months, 25% 3 to 6 months. So over half of you on this live stream right now have been working towards your Network Plus sometime in the last 6 months. So you're relatively new to this information. So I think it would be good if we just jump into some of the questions that are out there. The first question, I'm going to hit you with something related to STP. Hopefully first you know what STP is. That's really part of the challenge of these questions is I want you to think about what these things might be. So I'm going to click next so you'll see your Socrative automatically change to the next question, which is which of these would not be an STP port state? Now what I did was make a couple of changes to your screen. So now you can see there is a different set of multiple choice options available on Socrative. Is it switching, forwarding, blocking, learning, or listening? One of these would not be an STP port state. So if you think you know what the answer is, maybe you can also go through and figure out how the answer to this might be. Maybe you know what some of the states are, and this happens to be a process of elimination, trying to figure out what it might not be. It might not be switching or forwarding or blocking or learning or listening. One of these certainly would not be the right one. If you think you know, don't answer in the chat room. Never answer in the chat room. Don't Google it. Stop Googling it. You should, of course, just give it a shot. Pretend that you're sitting at the exam, you've been asked this question, and now you want to be able to figure this piece out. My goal when I make these questions is to try to get about 50% of you getting this right. So I'm trying to make them hard enough that half of you are going to absolutely get this wrong. So if you get this wrong, it's actually a good thing because you can never learn anything until you get it wrong. So that's my idea behind this is if I make these at least a couple of steps for you to think through, and at that point, you may or may not know the right answer, take a guess, which is also what you should do on your exam as well, is take a guess with these. So let's see how we did with this one. A number of you have answered which of these would not be an STP port state. And if I click how do we do, we're kind of split for number one, aren't we? We've got almost a tie here between learning and between switching. And then I would say double digits for forwarding and blocking, and only 5% said listening. So which of these would not be an STP port state? Now, STP is the spanning tree protocol. This is the protocol that's used to be able to prevent loops in a layer 2 network or a switched network. So all of these switches that we're connecting together, if you were to take one connection and a switch and plug it directly into itself, it would effectively be creating a loop on that switch, and you would very rapidly overwhelm the capacity of that switch because of all of the broadcasts and multicasts and other traffic that would be constantly looping through that particular connection. Well, that would obviously be a bad thing, but there's no way to prevent this unless you're doing something like using spanning tree protocol. The spanning tree protocol effectively prevents loops on a switched network, which is exactly what we would like to be able to do. So let's go through what some of those states are, because as you turn on spanning tree, it has to figure out how to connect your network together to prevent these loops. One of these states is the blocking state, because obviously if you take a connection and plug it directly back into the switch, spanning tree is smart enough to realize, wait a second, there is a loop going on there. I'm going to block one of those connections so that it will not create a loop on the network. There's also a part where spanning tree will listen to determine where is this traffic coming from? How is everything connected? It figures all of this out automatically. You don't even have to tell spanning tree, how does all of this stuff work? Well, spanning tree knows exactly how it works because it listens before it starts acting. And that's an important state of the spanning tree protocol. The learning part means as it's listening, it's watching everything go by and it's making a list of where it believes all the different switches are on your network. And it creates a list of where those are and what interfaces it would use to get to those other switches on your network. Once it makes the determination after listening for a certain amount of time and learning what's going on, it then begins forwarding traffic over connections that would not allow a loop to occur. So obviously we have that first state, a blocking up here. Well, we also need, of course, to be able to forward traffic as well. Some of these interfaces might be blocked. Certainly some of these interfaces will be forwarding traffic. And as an administrator, if you wanted to go into the switch and turn off the port manually, this is an administrative disable, that would mean that the port is disabled in Spanning Tree and would obviously not use that interface at all. So if we know those particular Spanning Tree port states, blocking, listening, learning, forwarding, and disabled, we can now go back and look at our list of switching, forwarding, blocking, learning, and listening. And the only one in this list that would not be a Spanning Tree port state is the first one of switching. Switching, the 32% of you that answered switching got that one absolutely right. Switching is not one of those Spanning Tree port states. The port states are blocking, listening, learning, forwarding, and then, of course, the disabled connection for the switch, Spanning Tree on the switch as well. So if you answered A, switching, you knew that that was not one of the port states, and you got it absolutely right. Well done with that. I think that was a good one to start with. And since only 38 or 32% of you got that one right, that was a good one that we can now take with us. And now we've learned something already in the study group. See, there's always a nice shiny side of this as well. Let's do another one. This one deals with something called VLAN hopping. I think this is a question even I've got a number of different options available to you. If you're watching on Socrative, you can, of course, go in and look at these different options. Which of these would be a method used when VLAN hopping? It's got to be one of these options that I'm providing you. Would it be MAC address spoofing? Would it be ARP poisoning? Would it be social engineering, a buffer overflow, or double tagging? One of these are all obviously attacks that can be used on someone's network. You may recognize a number of them. You should recognize all of them, obviously, when you're working through this. So see if you happen to know which one of these methods would be used when you're doing VLAN hopping. So again, it's a two-step process. You have to know what VLAN hopping is, and then you have to know how someone would perform VLAN hopping, whatever that is. So one of these has got to be one of these that you might step through. If you think you know the answer, go to Socrative.com to the student login link and go to the room name Professor Messer. That would be a good one to step through to be able to work out the details. Hopefully you'll know what that answer is. I'm going to take a peek, in fact, on my side and see what these are. I like doing a question that has these multiple steps in it. That way you're able to think about different ideas of what's there. I try not to do a lot of true-false, but you could, of course, get true-false questions on your exam. On our study groups, I like it to be a little more involved. And later on, I even have some fill-in-the-blanks. So I don't leave it completely multiple choice. Sometimes I like to see off the top of your head what the different responses might be, what the different things might be when working through this. So let's see how we did. Which one of these would be a method used when VLAN hopping? How do we do? Well, we're kind of split again. We've got, I guess, the majority, because it did hit 50%. We'll say 50.1%. Said double tagging. MAC address spoofing, 34%. So I guess there's really two camps here. It's either going to be double tagging or it's going to be MAC address spoofing. Now, there are single digits for ARP poisoning, social engineering, and buffer overflow, but those really aren't contenders. We've really got a clear choice between these two options for a VLAN hopping. VLAN hopping is an interesting a security attack. It's an interesting way for somebody to gain access to part of the network that they would normally not have access to. And one of the challenges with VLANs is that there are many ways to craft a packet so that you're able to gain access to places you shouldn't. One of these ways is through double tagging. This is where you're putting two VLAN tags, which normally when you look at a packet, there's a single VLAN tag telling it where this packet ultimately is supposed to go. What the bad guys will do is put an extra tag in. So it tags itself and gets to the first VLAN, and then the first VLAN realizes it needs to go to a second VLAN, which of course it should not ever be going to. That first VLAN removed by the first switch, the second VLAN removed by the second switch. The problem, though, is when you're doing double tagging, there's no return traffic going the other direction. So you never really know, as the bad guy, if what you were sending through the network ever got there. And quite honestly, A lot of organizations will prevent double tagging by making sure that no normal traffic is traveling on what's called the native VLAN. This is the default VLAN that traffic goes to if nothing else is tagged inside of this traffic. So double tagging takes advantage of that. Here's a visual of what this double tagging looks like. This is from my double tagging video. So if you wanted to really break this down and see exactly what happened, you've got these two tags, a red and a green. When it hits the first switch, it gets rid of the first tag, and since it gets rid of that green tag, now the red tag is left, and when it gets down to the other side, it heads now to the red VLAN and on to the victim device. And that's obviously what you don't want to have happen. You're on the green VLAN, you should never be talking directly to the red VLAN, and that's why the double tagging works so well. So if you are one of the folks that answered E double tagging, I almost hit my 50% exactly. That's what I was trying to do. I feel like I did the right thing with this question. It would not be MAC address spoofing. MAC address spoofing, very useful if you want to do something like a man in the middle, which is also a good reason for ARP poisoning. MAC address spoofing can get around, of course, MAC filters as well. Social engineering is when a human being is talking to another human being in some method and trying to get information out of that human. And buffer overflow is often used to take advantage of a vulnerability with an application to be able to send information into an app or get information out of an app that you would not normally have access to. VLAN hopping, very clearly a switch-related piece. I think MAC address spoofing was a pretty good guess. If you were one of the 34% that guessed that, unfortunately, not correct. E double tagging would be the correct response with this one. So well done. I think that was another one of those things we have to know about in the Network Plus is security. And that certainly is one of the things we have to know is that people can communicate across different VLANs, and it is obviously a security concern. VLANs themselves not a security function. They're more of an organizational function, but people sometimes will take advantage of that. Here's another question for you. Let's go to the next one. Again, no answering the chat room. Don't Google this. But which of the following would be the best way to diagnose a broadcast storm? This is a very common network analysis type function, network management function. You want to check this if your servers are getting slower. Broadcast storms can obviously be a big problem on switch networks, on routed networks. So it's very broad in how you would approach diagnosing a broadcast storm. How would you do that? It can affect everything on your network. So would you, here's your options, disconnect all network devices, perform packet capture, change all switch interfaces to half duplex, install the latest operating service pack, or power cycle the primary internet router. We know the broadcast storm can affect all of these things. So where do we start? Which one of these, and again, this is a very common way for CompTIA to ask these questions, is which of the following would be the best way to diagnose a broadcast storm? In these answers, one or two or even three of these answers could be a way to diagnose a broadcast storm. Certainly, I can think of at least two on here that I might use to help troubleshoot, maybe even three to help troubleshoot a broadcast storm, but only one of them is really going to be the best way. So maybe you can use some of those tips and ideas and thoughts that I just gave you. I gave you a few tips in there to start working through this and try to figure out which of these would be really the best way to do this. Now, if you've been on an enterprise network really of any size, then you've probably dealt with broadcast storms or at least been concerned about the number of broadcasts on a network. So it's usually important to be able to diagnose these broadcast storms properly. So we've got a number of people that have answered. Let's see what our answers are in this one. In this particular case, we've got one that is well above any of the others. 85% said perform a packet capture, but is that really the best way to diagnose a broadcast storm? If I had to choose between all of the ways I could do this, disconnecting network devices would be a way to do this. Performing a packet capture would be a way to do this. Changing switch interfaces to half duplex might slow down the number of broadcasts. Not really a good way to diagnose a storm. Installing service packs, nobody chose that one. I agree, would not fit. Power cycling the primary internet router might help you diagnose if the broadcasts are coming from the router. So really, there's three possible options here that might be the case. Broadcasts are certainly something to be concerned about. However, broadcasts can, they're a natural part of IP version 4. There are different applications and different functions that use broadcasts to be able to communicate. They are a necessity on the network, but they can be a problem because every device on that VLAN or every device on that local subnet sees all of these different broadcasts going out. If you have a network of 10 devices, it might not be a problem. If you have a network of 100 devices and they're all sending these broadcasts, it might indeed be an issue. So the reason it's an issue is that every device that's on the network has to look at every packet that's being sent that is a broadcast. So if a frame is coming across as a layer 2 broadcast, if it's being sent as a layer 3 IP address broadcast, all of these devices now have to grab that information, see what's inside, determine if that broadcast has anything to do with them, and if it doesn't, then they throw it away. But by then, the damage is already done. They've already pulled the packet into the computer. The computer has looked at it. There's CPU cycles and time that it takes on the network to be able to do all of these things, all because it may be something that doesn't even apply to that device. So obviously, we want to make sure our broadcasts are something that are kept at a reasonable level. And the best way to do this is what most people already said. It's with a packet capture, because you can see exactly the type of traffic coming through the network. You should be able to use this packet capturing to be able to know exactly who's sending broadcasts, what type of broadcasts are being sent, where they're going, and how many of them are occurring over a certain period of time. You want to be able to then, if you are having a broadcast problem, either minimize the number of broadcasts based on the amount of traffic that's coming over your network. Maybe you can understand what application is causing this or what process is causing the broadcast. And it would be a good way to minimize that is to really go into the details of the broadcast and stop those from occurring as well. So you may be able to minimize broadcasts, but if you can't, you may have to split the network up into smaller pieces. That may be the way that we resolve a broadcast storm, and that may be really the only way, is splitting the network. I think that's why most people will always have a smaller sized network over a larger sized network, because if you keep it small, you're already minimizing the chance of having a broadcast storm. And I think that's one of the reasons why people will have networks that are really under 100 devices or more. If you have a larger network than that, then you really have to be very diligent at finding the broadcast storms and where it might be out there. So if you're one of the folks that answered B, perform a packet capture, 84% of you said yes. That's exactly what I would do if I needed to perform a packet capture. The Network Plus certification is extensive. There are more abbreviations in the Network Plus certification than most any other certification you'll run into. There's information on IP subnetting that you have to know. There's details about protocols, port numbers, cabling, fiber connectors, copper connectors. You have to know about how proxies work and how topologies are, and there's encryption and there's security. There's so much here. And so what I did was take all of the details of all of my videos, and I created a set of course notes. You can see this is the course notes. It's just a smaller version of these on the screen. There are 15 pages for the N10006 where I've just packed in as much information as I possibly could, as if you were sitting there and taking notes yourself, as if you were the one making all of these notes from my videos, but instead of you having to do it, I've already done this for you. It's one of the ways I like to be able to have these things available and have you work with them. The course notes that look like this, here they are on my screen. So here's the course notes. I've taken all the bullet points, the graphics, the details, the explanation of really what's going on, and I've put them into these course notes. Maybe it's details about port numbers and interfaces and other things. They're all put into a single place and into a very concise and easy to read view, I like to think, and very graphical. So you can see the interface. You can see the different port numbers. They're all there and working through them. This is also a great way to support the site. So a number of you have said, I want to contribute to the site in some way. I don't accept any type of donation, but if I can give you something back, I like to do it that way. So I've created these course notes as a way that if you like the video course, maybe this is how you support the site as well, by contributing through $10 to buy my Network Plus course notes. And I've got course notes for A Plus and Network Plus and Security Plus as well. I've got quite an infrastructure of devices that keep this website running. We're up to over 1 million videos viewed every month. So it takes a number of servers to keep all of these things tracking. If you've been following me in my chat room throughout throughout the week, you'll know that I'm either working on one of my web servers or my database server or my proxies or my security devices. There's a lot of moving parts to keep this going. So I want to thank everyone who has participated and contributed towards the course notes. You can find out all about these at professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus Course Notes. And thank you so much for your ongoing support. Let's do another question as well, shall we? I've got another one here. This one deals with a network type of connection, an RS-232. Is that a network connection? Is that what I do with that? An RS-232 connection. I guess you can do a number of things with an RS-232 connection. Which one of these, though, would be the most likely use? Again, it's that CompTIA language they use, which is most likely being able to use this. I've got a number of options for you. So your options are Ethernet loopback, POTS, whatever that is, router configuration, gigabit Ethernet patch, punch down block, or Ethernet crossover cable. One of these would be the most likely use of an RS-232 connection. If you think you know the answer to this one, you can go to Socrative.com to the student login and go to Room Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser, and you can answer the question. Don't answer in the chat room. Don't Google. Stop Googling RS-232. That's not what you want to do. Take a guess. If you don't know what it is, here's your chance to see how well you can really step through all of the different answers and determine which one of these might be the most likely use of an RS-232 connection. I think this is a good way to test yourself if you don't know some of these, to step through these and try to figure out those pieces. This is one wherever I start working through trying to get the right pieces of all of the different components you need to know. There is a huge number of things to pull from. So when I'm putting together these questions, one of the things you'll notice is that when you register for the study group, I ask you what the number one question you want to have answered. And so I go through those questions to kind of jog my memory about what things might be good to put on the study group. You might also want to look at some of these things yourself. You can, of course, go out to the website, professormesser.com, to the chat room. There's a contact us link at the top and bottom. That might be another way to get in touch with me and send me questions that you might want to be able to see on the study group. Let's see how we did with this. Which of these would be the most likely use of an RS-232 connection? Well, we're sort of split again on this one as well. Let's see what we answered, though. 38% would be the number one answer. You got router configuration. So not the majority, but certainly a large number of folks. Number two would be POTS. We'll have to figure out what that is in a moment. At least a quarter of you chose that one. And then a solid number three, Ethernet crossover cable. And then we got single digits for Ethernet loopback, gigabit Ethernet patch, and punch down block. So which one of these would be the best use of an RS-232 connection? This term RS-232, kind of antiquated, sort of an old term, but we still use that RS-232 to be able to connect devices together. It's a term that's been around since 1969. We landed on the moon in 1969. That's how long the recommended standard 232, which is a standard communications method over these connectors, but we often in the computer world describe RS-232 and DB9 or even DB25 as exactly the same thing. When we say RS-232, that's what we're talking about, is that type of connection. This is, if you're working in networking, you will use an RS-232 connection because this is what we use to be able to communicate to our infrastructure devices. If you are setting up a router, if you're setting up a firewall, if you're setting up a switch, you first have to connect to this device over a serial connection. And the serial connection is going to use this generally in these latest types of devices, a DB9 connection. So it might be a router or firewall with a physical DB9 connection on it. You can see the DB9 connection here at the bottom. This one on the right is video. That's DB15. Really, these are DE. You can see they're different sizes, but we tend to just call everything a DB on our computer. And the DB25, an old parallel port. So you might see this 9-pin connection on a router or a firewall or a switch. A lot of the newer router firewall switches might also have an RJ11 or even an RJ45 connection used for its console connection. And ultimately, you'll plug back in via a serial connection on your computer. Now, your modern laptops and tablet devices don't have these larger DB or DE ports on them. So what you often see on your device is a USB connection, and that you'll use a USB conversion cable to convert to a DB9 for a serial connection that will then connect to your router or switch or firewall configuration cable, and then plug ultimately into the switch or the configuration. So it's one of these types of connecting to devices that is almost universal. It's hard to find on your newer devices. So anybody that is a good network analysis or network administrator, somebody who works with networking devices, you can ask them and they will have an answer for you. What USB to serial conversion device are you using? Do you have a certain model or make that works well for you? Because different USB connectors have different drivers. Some work better in Windows 7, some work better in Windows 10. Some people use different apps on a mobile tablet type device. Just depends. So whenever you see RS-232, or you see DB9, or you might even see DB25, that would be quite unusual. But all of these are generally associated with a serial connection and a standard way of communicating over that serial connection to be able to update, manage, maintain, and provide administration for our routers, our firewalls, or switches. Now, ultimately, once we connect to our firewall or switch with this serial connection, we are usually just doing the initial configuration there. We're adding an IP address, a subnet mask, a default gateway. We're telling it to take that configuration, and then we unplug, because then we can SSH, or we can use the web-based front end to connect to that device and administer it over the network connection. But of course, network connection is really useful to be able to have this here. So make sure that if you're someone who is who's working through the administration of these devices, that you have a good serial cable that you're communicating and connecting via an RS-232 or serial connection to your devices. So if you're one of the folks who answered, the 45% that said router configuration, got that one absolutely right. You see Ethernet loopback, that is not what we would use RS-232. That's as far away from Ethernet as you can possibly be. So there's no Ethernet associated with that whatsoever, which means gigabit Ethernet patch and Ethernet crossover cable would not be an appropriate answer for that either. It would not be POTS, which was our number 2 answer. Those of you, I think maybe some of you just took a stab because you had no idea what POTS was, which is the plain old telephone system. Those are the cables and connectors we would use to connect an analog telephone to our network, to our home or our office. Remember analog telephones? Some of us still have some. That is one we would connect through a POTS, plain old telephone system connection, which is just an old way of saying those RJ11 connectors that we use for our old telephones. And it wouldn't be punch down blocks. Those are the devices we use to be able to connect our networks together in our computer room. So it would not be used for an RS-232 connector either. Well, I have now another question for you, but this one is a fill in the blank. And when I do a fill in the blank, I want to have a lot of detail for you to be able to give me as much information as possible about this next question. And the next question is, have it up on my screen, and make sure you answer as specifically. I'm looking for a type, not just what it is, but give me a specific type of what this is. The answer is, our question is, what component is this? You think you know the answer. I've got a multiple, you just put in the answer. It's a fill in the blank. I'm not giving you multiple choice on this one, which of course you might get on the exam. One of the performance-based questions might be a fill in the blank. So make sure you go through and look at those. Now, some of you were thinking plain old telephone system on the last question, because the modems used to connect through RS-232, but they were connecting to a modem. Ultimately, the modem was connecting over the plain old telephone system wiring, and that does not use RS-232. RS-232 is between your modem and the computer. And again, the question was, which one of these would be the best? That's the real challenge you have with the CompTIA exams, is they want that one answer on these. So a number of you know what this is, but some of you don't know what exactly it is. You sort of know what it is, but you aren't sure maybe of a model type of what this happens to be. There's a better look at it. So I'm looking at the answers as they're coming through, and almost everybody knows what it is, But some of you think you know what model or type it is, but you're wrong. Some of you think you know what model or type it is, and you're right. This is something that you will very commonly see in your data center, in your computer rooms. You'll run into this quite a bit. Almost everybody who's answering, for instance, knows. In fact, some of you are saying, "Oh, I know what I do with this. I just don't know the name of it." I get you. You have to know all these different models and types of these things. So we need to be as specific as possible. I think we're getting about a 50% on this one if I had to go through and look at all of the different answers and being able to look at this. Some of you have a very interesting way of remembering this particular device as well. Let's see how we did with this. Let's go to, I'm not going to show you the answers coming in, but I will tell you that about 50% of you said a 66 block, and about 50% of you said a 110 block. But almost all of you said that it's a punch-down block. And you're absolutely correct. This is a punch-down block. It's a patch panel. It's generally used for analog voice. There are some digital connections, some older legacy digital connections that might use a 66 block for this to work. The way this works is you would connect wires into the left side, and those wires are then connected to the right side. So it's a way to wire up your entire office, have everything go back to one central point, and then you never have to touch any of the wiring that you've done in your office. When you need to make patches inside of your computer room, you would find the right connection on this punch-down block, and that way you don't have to touch any of the wires out in the rest of your infrastructure. That is the goal with a punch-down block. People often say, why would I need a punch-down block? Because you want to have everything wired back to a central point and then never touch it again. Then you would use the other side of the punch-down block to make all of the changes that you need to make. Seems odd that we would do that, though, with these devices. Why would we use a punch-down block rather than something like a modular connection? It seems like modular connections would be quicker. We can unplug an RJ45 and plug it in somewhere else. And some people do have punch-down blocks that connect in maybe with the punch-down connector on one side and an RJ45 on the other because they like to have that speed. But that means you have to now have another connector, has to be crimped to a wire, has to be crimped properly, and then that crimp has to stay in place. With a punch-down block, you're putting the wire into this piece of metal. You're using a punch-down tool to push it into the pieces that are there, and then it never moves. You don't have to worry about an RJ45 connector going bad. You don't have to worry about anything within the device having a problem. Now, the punch-down block itself maybe some of these connectors could be bent or could be broken when you're punching something in, so you wouldn't use that one. You would go down to the next one. There are single connections on a punch-down block that occasionally will go bad, but usually they're going bad when you're installing it, and you know immediately. Usually it doesn't go bad over time unless you're in an area where you might have rusting. There's some of these 66 blocks you might even see out in the world. And if you ever look on Reddit, there are a number of subreddits for the probably aptly named subreddit called Cable Porn, where they show some really nice cabling setups. There's also some bad cabling that they might show in some of the others. A lot of people will show a before and after. I had this configuration, and then I changed it to really look at this configuration. So a really nice way to see how other people are cabling up their networks as well. We don't see a lot of 66 blocks these days because they don't handle our faster and higher speed Ethernet connections. We usually mostly use these for analog phone connections. If you have a fax machine in your environment, it has a 66 block because fax machines don't work well if you are on a digital connection. I know people are still using faxes, though. Someone asked me the other day to fax them something, and I said, I have to get back in my time machine and go back to 1992, so I can do that for you. But indeed, even in today's world, people are using faxes. They're never going to go away. So that's just how it works with these fax machines. So let's see how we did. Let me scroll through. We can't really see how we did. A number of you said punch down block, not 110, but the other one. I'll give you half credit for that. Some people said it's a punch down block. I don't know if it's a 66 block or if it's a 100 something block. You came close to it's a 110. That's the other one you would run into. Usually it's the 110 that we see on most people's Ethernet networks these days because they can support the higher speed Ethernet connections. Some of you said a punch down block. Half credit for that one as well. It's not really, I guess it is a patch panel. I was really looking for a punch down block and specifically that it is the 66 punch down block. A 65, I guess one off of the punch down block. That's pretty close. Oh, look, there's an update to Spectacle. How timely that I would get that right now in the middle of my presentation. This is one where I think most of you did pretty well with this when you knew it was a punch down block, but it is indeed a 66 block. There's a lot of different things to know on the exam. All of these performance-based questions as well can be a bit daunting. There's a lot of performance-based questions you would need to step through and understand how to use. This is one of the challenges I have with these exams is they are extensive in the number of things you have to know. And with performance-based questions, you might be put at a command prompt and you might have to type things in yourself to be able to get this command prompt to do whatever it is they need to have happen. Well, fortunately, GTS Learning has created live labs that allow you to troubleshoot internet connections and DNS connections, understand common network vulnerabilities using host-based firewalls and network address translation, understanding how IPsec works. And these are live online labs that you can work through. I'll zoom up on this one. You can see I've got the lab on the right side of the screen. I can even pop that out. Even shows the diagrams. On the left side of the screen, I've got machines that I can now turn on and use. I'm using HTML5 that's in my browser to be able to do this, and I can simply click at a device and power it on. Click on this device and power it on, as if you had all of these machines sitting all around you and you're able to use them as well. This is one where it becomes very useful to have all of this online because I can be anywhere and do this. I can be on the beach, I can be at the library, I can be at school, I can be at work and be able to run through these labs and be able to learn more about IPsec, troubleshoot a DNS problem, configure a spanning tree configuration on my switches, all done with these live labs. There's also an hour that you can get for free just by trying this. You don't have to pay a thing by going to professormesser.com/netlabs. And you can try out these, scroll down to the bottom of that screen, and you can try these labs free for an hour. And when you do that, you'll be able to then go to these devices that are now powered up, and it's a full-blown Windows machine. This happens to be a Windows domain controller, for instance, or I can go to a number of different devices that this one happens to be a Windows 8 device and a Windows 7 device, and run through all of their labs. The first lab, for instance, runs through starting up your system and connecting and walking through the other pieces. It is all interactive. It's a very easy way to get things running. And I like the way that they, when they're working through these, it becomes very natural now to step through all of these and work through them, and a special price too. If you're on my website, you'll notice the price is a lot better than the price you might get directly from, for instance, the GTS Learning website. So try this out as well. See what you think in being able to work through it by going to professormesser.com/netlabs. You'll be able to get screens like this and work through the labs as well. And you can't break anything. That's a nice thing about it. If you don't like the lab, you can reset everything and go back the way it started. I think that's another great way to step through this and get all of these going. Thanks for GTS Learning as well for their support and having all of these live labs available. We wouldn't be able to make these available at this price and have all of these performance-based things without them. So thanks for GTS Learning for doing that. There's more questions, of course, on the study group. Here's the next one available. What is the minimum category of cable required for 10 gigabit Ethernet? I wanted to give you a question that was really about understanding what goes where. One of the things about the Network Plus certification is there's so much that you have to memorize. And this is kind of one of these memorization questions. What is the minimum category of cable required for 10 gigabit Ethernet? Is it category 3, category 5, category 5E, category 6, or category 6A? I kind of threw all of that at you all at once, but if you think you know the answer, you can go to Socrative.com and bring that up and try it yourself. That might be something to step through to be able to have all of those answers there if you think you know what that happens to be. The 10 gigabit Ethernet obviously is not something we see a lot of out there in the world, but we do run into it, especially in a data center environment. We are running into multiples of 10 gigabit Ethernet in a data center environment. So this is a good question. You're going to see more and more and more 10 gigabit being installed and working with those as we go throughout all of these different things that we're doing. So if you think you know the answer, go to Socrative.com. I'm going to take a peek on my side and see how you do. These folks are doing pretty well with knowing your different pieces and being able to work through these. I think one of these would be, and stop Googling that. I see you Googling it. Don't do that. You should know the answer to these. What is the minimum category of cable required for 10 gigabit Ethernet? Well, we've got 42% of you said category 6. That's our highest number. The next highest would be 26% said category 5E. The 14% and 19%, almost a tie for category 5 and category 6A. So if you think you know the answer, you probably, I think the ones that got the most on this was category 6. So let's see how we did. Here are the copper cable categories that I have listed on my copper cable category video. This is one where we really break this down interestingly. Category 3, you really don't see category 3 or category 5 any longer. Those two types have really been deprecated in the industry. It costs exactly the same to put in category 5E, so that's pretty much what everybody runs, even if you're using one of these older or slower types of configurations. In fact, if you were to look at somebody who was running an analog phone line these days, they're probably running it with Cat 5e because that's the only cable you can really get these days at the lowest level. And you can see Cat 5e supports gigabit, 100 megabit and gigabit with 100 base TX and 1000 base T to 100 meters. The first category, though, that supports 10 gig Ethernet is over 10 G base T. That is the copper version of 10 gigabit Ethernet. It supports it from 37 to 55 meters, and that would be category 6. Category 6 had an enhancement and augmentation to it. If I want to use the right terminology, the augmentation is why we call it category 6A, that adds some additional manufacturing processes to it that allow us to take 10 gigabit and now reliably go up to 100 meters with the 10 gigabit connection. So in our case, we wanted to know the minimum category of cable required for 10 gigabit Ethernet, and we can see here that category 6 indeed was the minimum. If you answered D, category 6, the 42% of you got this one absolutely right. Some of you in the chat room even said, I see category 7. You'll even see category 8. Neither category 7 or category 8 are true standards of category. They're more of marketing terms that are using these category names in order to confuse us in the industry. And they're doing a fine job, I must say. But they're not standardized categories for those. We've still got another 15 minutes of questions left. So let's go through another question on this one. Here's the question. I think I've got it right here. Here's a better way to view it. Which of these would be the most likely reason for banner grabbing? Whatever banner grabbing is. So again, you have to know what banner grabbing is, and you want to know what the most likely reason would be for banner grabbing based on this list. And the list is, would the most likely reason for banner grabbing be to determine open ports on a server? Would it be to disable a legitimate network service? Would it be to redirect a service to another device? Would it be to determine the type and version of a service? Or would it be to capture network packets? One of those, being able to work through there. Which of these would be the most likely reason for banner grabbing? If you think you know the answer, you might want to go figure out the pieces here and figure out what banner grabbing is and why I would ever want to do banner grabbing. That really is a good question. Why would I want to go about doing that and being able to work through it? Maybe you happen to know. You can certainly work through those pieces and being able to work through those. Folks in the chat room said, hey, what happened to category 4? We didn't see much category 4. Category 4 cable was created for Token Ring. Specifically for Token Ring, it was able to support, I think, up to the 16 megabit. Token Ring ran at 4 megabits and 16 megabits. It's a topology that is now really phased out completely in the industry. We don't see Token Ring. It's more of a museum piece at something we talk about historically as something we used. I used Token Ring extensively in my networking days, and Category 4 was created just for those Token Ring networks. But most people realized Category 5 cost about the same, and everybody could see that they were migrating off of Token Ring, and everybody was eventually moving over into the Ethernet world. So most people that were putting cabling in a building That's something you do maybe once in the lifetime of your network. You rarely go back and put in new cabling in a building. It's something that is unusual or something you would only do after a very long period of time. And people thought, or do I put in category 4 or do I put in category 5 that will at least support 100 megabit Ethernet, which at that time was incredibly fast. Let's go with category 5. So category 4 really never caught on. And really discussing category 4 doesn't make much sense because you can't get it obviously any longer. And it applied to token ring. So that really didn't work either. At one point, one type of connector for token ring was this universal connection, which was this big, large square connector on the token ring cable, being able to work through those. Most everybody that ran token ring originally used those connector types. I used a lot of connections that were RJ45 because mostly everybody moved over to this RJ45 connector and all of their mouths and everything that they used. But the hermaphroditic connector, which is what IBM called it for the token ring, I think I have a picture of one, it was really something to work with. The way it worked, it plugged into two sides. So it connected. This was not category 4 cable. This was type 1 cable. This was not a category. So there's your history lesson for the day about token ring. If you want to talk more about that in the after show, we can do that. Let's get the answer to this one, though. Which of these would be the best reason for banner grabbing? Well, we can see that 48% said determine the type and version of a service. 27%, though, a quarter of us said redirect a service to another device. And then we've got double digits here. Number 3 is capture network packets. Single digits for determining an open port on a server or disabling a legitimate network service. So which one of these things would be used for banner grabbing? Let's find out. Here we go. This is where you want to know what service is running on a device. So you want to go out and grab the banner that is presented when you connect to a server. You may have seen this if you SSH into a device or you telnet into a device. It puts information up on the screen. The same thing happens on a web server. If you connect to a web server, we don't see it because we're usually in a browser. But if you connect to a web server from a command line, in fact, that's exactly what I have here. I ran the NC command on my Mac OS. You can run this on Linux, and there's an NC command you can get also for Windows. And I connected to my web server on port 80, and this is the information it gave. So ProfessorMesser.com said, I just wanted, in fact, I ran a head command, which is an HTML command, to ask for information. My server doesn't, or the front end to my server doesn't provide that. So it said, sorry, that's a bad request. This was the date and time I did it. Text HTML, content link 177. In fact, it even said it was a server running Nginx. So that is the type of web server that's running on the device that you connect to when you connect to ProfessorMesser.com, which is not really my web server. So we can talk all about the network configuration of ProfessorMesser.com sometime. But you can see Nginx is always here. And it will always show Nginx because that's the front end. You never really connect directly to my web server. This device you're connecting to connects to my web server and it's running Nginx. But from your world, that's ProfessorMesser.com. Usually has version numbers, service names. You can find out a lot of information about what's there. And once you know what's there, you may be able to find that a particular service that's running a particular version has a particular vulnerability that then would allow you to get into that device. So that's one good way that you can do a little bit of reconnaissance to be able to then use this information against itself. Very easy to do this, and the headers can certainly be something that you can use if you're a bad guy. So useful to do that. In the chat room, folks are asking, we're getting close to the end of the study group. The study group is available immediately afterwards. It's not something that's uploaded or I have to process. I click the stop button, it processes for a minute or two, and immediately the replay is available for you to watch anytime during the study group. So if you have to leave and you want to come back and watch the rest, you can absolutely do that at any time. Just come back to the /live connection or go out on the internet into the categories that I have there, and you're able to do that as well. But let's do another question. We got a little bit of time left, right? Oh, by the way, if you are watching this for continuing education unit credit, you get a 1 hour credit if you use the special term banner grabbing. That is our word of the month. The Network Plus CEU word of the month is banner grabbing. You want to go to the either top or bottom of any page on my website, and there's a Contact Us link on my website. You have to go to that Contact Us link to be able to do this. The process of doing this is also part of earning the CEU. Go to the Contact Us link. Inside of that, put that this is the Network Plus study group for May of 2016. Give me your name and your email address in there so I can, of course, send this back to you, and I will send you back a digital continuing education unit. I'll even digitally sign it so you can prove it really came from me and that nothing was changed inside of that document that I'm sending to you, and that would be an hour that you get already to be able to put into your list of continuing education units. So banner grabbing is it. That's really useful to know if you're ever trying to figure out what's running on the other side. Do some banner grabbing. Let's get one more question in, shall we? We've got some time to be able to go through these. The question is, which of these specify the minimum terms for a current service offering? So it's a very specific terms I'm using in this particular question because there is a very specific thing I'm looking for. I'm looking to know which of these will specify the minimum terms for a current service offering. Is it MSA, SLA, SOW, or MOU? And did I make any of these up? Actually, all of these are real. I will tell you I did not make any of these up, even though they absolutely look like I made some of these up. This is not made up thing. All of them are real, which means you now have to know what each one of these things are, and you have to know which one of these might specify the minimum terms for a current service offering. So maybe you can step through these and know them as well. If you know the answer, go to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room, and you can answer in there. Don't answer in the chat room. And stop Googling what all those abbreviations are. Stop that. You should take a guess. Just take a stab. It doesn't count against you. Actually, it doesn't count at all. So that helps too, doesn't it? See if you happen to go through this and be able to work through those pieces. Maybe you do. Maybe you know what the answer is on this one and know what those specific minimum terms for a current service offering might be. I'm going to take a peek at how you folks are doing with this one. I think some of you have had to work with this before because I think you know the answer to this one. Let's see how we did with this one. Let's go and get these answers before we run out of time today. 61%, a pretty good number. 58%, 57%, it's going down more, said SLA. 25%, a quarter of you said MSA. Double digits, just over, is a SOW, and then an MOU. 7% said no, it can't possibly be an MOU. What were you thinking with this? Well, let's step through what all of these different abbreviations mean. SLA is a service level agreement. That is when you have a current service offering and you want to set some minimum requirements of what a third-party provider is giving you. So, for instance, if you wanted to have an internet connection, you buy that internet connection from a third party, you say, I want 99.999% uptime, and if you don't provide me that uptime, I want some penalties or some money back for the payments that I'm making. That's a very common service level agreement. There's also something called an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. It's very informal. It doesn't really have any contractual obligations. It's more of, here's what I think we should all be doing. Something you would not use when something requires maybe a contract, but something where you want everybody to be aware of what is expected of both sides. You've also got a master service agreement, an MSA. This is when you have maybe an idea that you might be doing some long-term services with an organization, and you want to set up a master agreement at the beginning that all of these 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 things that we're going to be doing over the next year or two or three will all apply back to this central agreement. It certainly helps legalities, and legalities are important when you're dealing with a third party. And ultimately, there is a statement of work. If you've ever had anybody come on site, they're working on your router, they're working on your network, they're working on your firewall, you have a list of things that have to be done to say, yes, this particular task was completed. And that's very commonly created as something called a statement of work, a SAL. Make sure that you have this list. You should not be going on site to do work if you're a service provider unless you have the list, a statement of work from that customer. And certainly from a customer perspective, you wouldn't have somebody come on site to complete a task unless they had a statement of work. That way, both sides know exactly when this particular task has indeed been completed. So in this case, if we want to be able to specify the minimum terms for a current service level offering or current service offering, the name is almost in the abbreviation, isn't it? It is a SLA. So if you answered B, those 56% of you that answered SLA, you got that one absolutely right. Now, where do all these things come from? They come from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure that if you do not have the CompTIA exam objectives, that you get them immediately. They will tell you everything you need to know for the exam. They'll tell you everything you need to study. They'll tell you when you're ready to take the exam, because you'll be able to go through the entire set of exam objectives to be able to understand that. Go out to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It will take you right to it. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives, and that will do that as well. So very easy to find, and you should have these. If you don't have them, you're doing yourself a disservice. Most of the books you have will list the exam objectives in them. Don't skip over that chapter. Read through them. Make sure you understand what is expected of you when you walk in the door for your certification exam. That can make or break. If you know everything in these exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam. It's that simple. So make sure you reference those. I like to tell you that tip every single month. And I have one of these next month. I have next month is my Network Plus study group on June the 15th, a little bit later in the month than we've previously done this, so make a note of that. You can also always go out to professormesser.com/calendar. If this is after June 15th when you're watching this video, you can always go to the calendar and see when we're doing our next live event. I do live events, usually an A+, a Network Plus, and a Security Plus study group every month, and you can go to the calendar and find out exactly when we are doing those. So make sure you make a note of those. Well, we've come to the end of an hour, haven't we, of the study group. I want to thank everybody for joining us. You can, of course, see my daily Network Plus pop quiz. One of the best ways to get it is on Twitter. So you can go to professormesser.com/Twitter. Of course, all of my Network Plus videos are at my website at professormesser.com. You can also find them on YouTube. Don't forget about my course notes. If you want to be able to have a great set of notes to be able to study from just prior to going into your exam, you can find those at professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes. Also, my thanks to GTS Learning and the 1 hour of live labs that you can get for free. That's not the right link, though. That says live labs. It should say, let's remind me later, that should say Net Labs. How's that for live streaming? Right there. It's Net Labs. Don't go to Live Labs. It's the A+ is on the Live Labs. The Net Labs is the Network Plus. And then we've got, of course, the calendar, as I mentioned. Thank you for joining us for this hour. For those of you that are watching, I just open up the phone lines and the chat room after this. Just answer questions really about almost anything. Otherwise, I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching the replays. Thank you for supporting the website. I would not be able to do this without you. And for that, I really am grateful. Thanks for all of your support throughout these weeks and months. And if you need anything, you can always find me on professormesser.com. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. That was, I know, it's over. Who can believe that? What happened there? That was something, wasn't it? Let's get the phone lines open. I don't have the phone number up yet because I haven't opened the phone lines. Let's do that. Let's open the phone lines. Let's host a show. I'll start the show. Of course, you can put questions into the chat room as well if you want to. I'll put up the phone lines, which you could even call in if you wanted to before I call in to listen in. This is all done in the cloud. So I have to call in to my cloud connection as well. It's 855-785-RJ45. If you're calling on Skype, you can call for free at +1 855-785-7545. So let me call up. How does this work? Do I punch a thing? Is there some stuff?
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome. Here we go. Well, sure.
Please enter your show number.
I will do that. I'll enter this number and press that.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, it's redundant. It's not a 6-digit PIN number. It's a 6-digit PIN.
Welcome.
So there we go. So if you wanted to call in, you can. You don't have to. Nobody's required to call in to be able to do that. Oh, can you save the chat thread? I don't think you can. Don't think you can, but you tell me what link you want. We can get a link for you. You can always go into the chat at my website anytime you want. I'm usually in there most of the day. I do have other things I do in my life. Somebody said the other day, oh, it must be great. You're doing a live study group. You get to talk to other people. I do talk to other people. I do leave this room eventually. People go, aren't you just here all the time? Isn't there? Do you ever leave this desk? I do leave this desk. I do. There's a door, and I definitely make use of it. Trust me. I've got 3 kids, a wife, a horse, 3 dogs. I got stuff going on, brother. I got things happening. But I do check in on the chat. There is also, I'll tell you, for you folks that do like to follow the chat when you're mobile on your phones, not on tablets, but on the phones, there's a really nice chat interface I've got going that I need to move over to be permanent on all my pages. But if you go to professormesser.com/chat, there's a really nice chat interface, user interface for a phone type environment. It's almost, I wish they would do that same interface for a tablet. I've already asked for that. That's one there, being able to work through those pieces. There are Cisco protocols in the Network Plus exam, but these are things you need to know. Well, OSPF is not a Cisco protocol. VLAN is not a Cisco protocol. RIP-v2 is not a Cisco protocol. EIGRP is a Cisco protocol. So there are protocols that are standardized. There are some that are Cisco related. You need to know what those are and being able to work through those. But you don't have to know how to get into the intricacies of understanding how EIGRP works and the EIGRP link states and understanding what the different EIGRP formulas are over different connections. You don't have to know any of that. You just have to know what it is and being able to work through it. That helps as well. Let's go to the phone calls while we're going through that piece and getting things ready. We got the 202 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, my name is Erica.
Hi, Erica. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I actually do not have any questions for you. I just had to say to you personally that I like your look with your hair now. The bald look, you look so much better with the hair. I like it. I think it's very cute. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that I think you're doing a wonderful job with helping us with getting ready for our exams. I'm about to take my A+ certification, my second part, and then I'll be doing Network Plus and Security Plus as well. So that's all. My comment was that I like your look.
No, well, good luck with your A+. I will tell you that the look has been done exclusively through Mrs. Professor Messer. She said, I want a beard. In fact, she said it before I just finished my A+, the latest A+ videos I did, and I couldn't do it in the middle. I didn't want to suddenly not have a beard, then have a beard in a video, but I did it right after that. So I will tell her that will make her day. I assure you, Erica.
Yeah,
I like
it.
Thank you. She'll be pretty happy with that. And good luck with your A+ certification. If there's anything we can do on this side to help, let us know.
You are doing plenty.
Fantastic. Thank you for calling, Erica. That actually makes my day too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care. That's nice. Anybody can call in and tell me how good I look anytime you want. Very, very good. Let's see what the chat room has. There are some questions on here as well. Can I go over gateways? Oh, gateway there are different terms for gateways. So this question really talks about gateways and what those are. The question is, there's default gateways that you may hear. If you're configuring an IP address, there's default gateway, which is really the router you would use to get out of this network. And then so you read, confusingly enough, that gateways can operate at any layer of the OSI model. And I guess that's kind of true. Gateway is kind of a generic term. It's one that doesn't specifically refer to a device. And part of the confusion is that we tend to call anything that converts from one type of communication to another type of communication a gateway. We kind of generically have called it that. There's not a device we can look at and say, this is a gateway, therefore this is what it does. Because there are so many different kinds of gateways, and we've used it just as a generic term. So a good example of this is we use the term default gateway to refer to a layer 3 device, which is also called a router, that allows us to communicate from one IP subnet to another IP subnet. That technically is a default gateway. But if you ever read a book, they will tell you that gateways operate also at layer 7, where it's taking one type of language or communication you're doing and converting that to a different type of communication or language, that's a gateway running at layer 7. And of course, you could have that same idea apply anywhere in the OSI model. For instance, here's a good example. Back in the day, we were talking about token ring earlier, so I'll use another term. And because this does still apply at some larger environments that have mainframes or mini computers where they want to be able to communicate to those devices, but many of those older devices have their own set of languages associated with them. Obviously, we have new computers. They communicate via TCP/IP. They communicate over some very common, well-known protocols like SSH or Telnet. And I need to still be able to talk to that mainframe. So there are devices called gateways that you can put in the middle where you talk to the gateway. It converts your SSH communication into something the mainframe can understand and then converts it back. There's a good example of a mainframe gateway that operates at layer 7. So there's two examples of a layer 3 gateway being a router and a layer 7 gateway being some type of mainframe mini computer. And there are other gateways as well, and being able to work through those. Very challenging to be able to negotiate the minefield of terms that you would find on the Network Plus exam. And I think that's a very good example of those terms and trying to understand why you see them written that way. And a good example, somebody else used this in the video voice over IP. Of course, Steve in the chat room would know this because he works with voice over IP every day. A media gateway. Well, when voice over IP, you're dealing with gateways there that are able to take your communication and use it or convert it or be able to use another type of media. A media gateway that gives you access to a voicemail. A media gateway that allows you to communicate from a POTS or traditional phone line system to a voice over IP system. There's another good example of those pieces. All kinds of different gateways. You will run into this term gateway throughout your career. And of course, it's going to mean different things at different times. There was one I worked with at a call center that was able to convert people calling in, not calling in, but connecting in with a chat, and allowed the chat to come up on my screen, which was not the normal chat screen. It was one designed for a call center. There was a blender gateway. They called it a blender. That was the name of the product that converted that and brought it onto my screen and allowed me to queue up a lot of different chats and be able to move through those and manage them all at the same time. So there's no single term that you can point to for gateway. What a good question. Can you access the Wi-Fi if you hide an SSID? This is something you will commonly see on networks. Let me see if I can connect to mine and show you what that might look like. I have a no, it's not that gateway. I might not have a wireless IP address that I can remember on my network to be able to show you. SSIDs, of course, is what we would broadcast out if you were to list out all of the wireless networks that are on your network or around you. You see that list if you're out in public or you're at home, you'll see your network is listed on there. But if you go to your access point, you turn off SSID broadcast, it's no longer listed there. So you would think that would be kind of secure, right? Because nobody can click on your network now to be able to connect to it. But the list of names of networks and the clicking on that is really something we do to make it easier for the end user. It's not a security function. So disabling your SSID broadcast does nothing for security. All it does is remove it from the list. You can, of course, and you can do this on your iPhone and your Android, on your laptop, in all of your operating systems, you can go into a separate part of the wireless configuration and say, forget about the SSID broadcast, just connect to the name right here that I'm going to give you and connect to that network manually. So that's a very common way to hide a network from everybody else, but still allow people access to it if they happen to know what the name is. Of course, you still want to have security on top of that. You still want to have a WPA2 encryption enabled. You want to be able to have a standard way for people to authenticate with a passphrase or with 802.1x, for instance, on the back end, if you're in a larger environment. That is a pretty significant difference if you're working through those. So make sure you know what those are as well, and that you understand that an SSID is just hiding it from the user, not hiding it from the bad guys. Let's go back to the phones. The 713 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? 713. Are you there, caller? You hear a beep whenever I pick up the line, but I'm not hearing anything from you. If you are calling in from Skype, you may want to try calling in and call the Skype test line before you call in. That way you're able to make sure that your microphone is working, that your speakers are working. I'll just drop you off of there and you can try calling in again. We've got more phone lines open if you wanted to call in and try that differently. Somebody in the chat room asking, how different are the questions from the N10005 to 006? Gosh, you must still have some 005 stuff out there. The 006 exam, of course, has been out for over a year. The questions, though, aren't that different as much as you might think. The network world moves a little bit slower relative to, for instance, things happening in the computer world with A+. The A+ exam has dramatic differences every 3 years because there are all new operating systems that are released. There's all new hardware that's available. There's all new processors that come out. New computer architectures are created and released very rapidly. But with the N10005 to 006, networks don't work like that. Ethernet networking has been around for a very long time, and it will be Ethernet networking still in 3 years. And it will be Ethernet networking still probably 3 years after that. So you don't tend to see huge differences in the content, but there is some. The 006 exam has a little more security on it because security has become so much more important recently. You see a lot more cloud-based and virtualization has shown up on the exam. So you do see a number of changes, but it's not a dramatic difference. Even still, though, if you have 005 study materials, I highly recommend that you get rid of those and you purchase 006 training materials at a bare minimum. There is enough difference between the exams that if you were working on this exam and you were trying to learn exactly what you needed to know, there are things that are new that would not be on your old materials and things that are on your old materials that you don't need to know for the 006 exam. So make sure you go through those and really understand what the differences might be, or just get rid of the old stuff. Go to the new, which is always my recommendation. Always get the latest stuff and work with that. It's so much easier than trying to figure out what the differences might be. I guess that's something you could do, of course, on there. That is indeed exactly what it is. So there is a lot that we would have been working through over the last month for these. The 006 videos are, of course, up to date with all those differences. On my website, you can't find it because I kind of hide it after an exam has been retired, but there are 005 videos. There's a playlist, for instance, on YouTube that you could go to, and you could watch the older videos if you wanted to. I don't recommend doing that either. I think you should really focus on the 006, and all of that's the latest as well. I see. So in your particular case, you invested in some test prep software. There's questions you got for the 005. Some of them apply. In fact, I would bet a number of those questions still apply, but there's new content that's not going to be in your 005, and some of the questions are going to be outdated that it will not appear on the 006. Question from Bill in the chat room. How much of the Cisco commands do you need to know for the exam? Well, if you look at the exam objectives from CompTIA, there are no Cisco commands listed in the exam objectives. So you don't need to know any. You can know 0 Cisco commands and pass your Network Plus. If you focus on exactly what's inside of those exam objectives, and I know I say it over and over and over again, but if you grab those exam objectives and you know every single bullet really well that's in those exam objectives, then you're going to know everything you need to know to pass the exam, and you'll find that there's no Cisco commands in there. I know there are some websites and some training materials I have seen for the N10006 that are asking you to do a lot of Cisco configurations, and I can't figure out why, because it is not on the exam at all. You need to know 0 Cisco. Don't waste your time learning Cisco commands. Unless you plan to do Cisco later on, that could certainly be something you do, but don't bother learning it for the N10006 for the Network Plus exam. It's not on there. It's not listed. There's no reason to know those things. It is a waste of time. The idea on the Network Plus exam is that you know what these things mean. You understand what those protocols do. You have some concept of what devices are used to be able to connect all of these things together and secure them, and what people are doing to attack them. That's really what the Network Plus exam is about. It's completely unnecessary to know these things for the Network Plus exam, though. It is, I've seen this as well. Bill saying, because this school, they have commands as part of the exam prep. I've seen this, and people talk to me about it. I just don't know why you would bother. You don't need to. It's not part of the exam objectives. If you are studying for the CCENT or ultimately the CCNA routing and switching, that applies to you. In fact, there's a ton of Cisco commands you have to know for the very first Cisco test, the CCENT. Of course, you need to know command lines. For Network Plus, you need to know exactly 0 Cisco command lines. So don't waste your time going through all of those and be able to know that. You'll notice a lot of people in the chat room have, throughout the study group today, said, I need a subnetting question. I need a subnetting question. I need a subnetting question. And you do need to know subnetting for the Network Plus exam. Absolutely. That is one of the things that's listed in the exam objectives, but it's such a small, tiny piece of the objectives, and it rarely gets into other parts of what you would need to know. So of course you need to know it because it's on the exam objectives, but because it's such a small part, it rarely comes up in the cycle of things that I go through during a study group. I have previously in other study groups talked about CIDR block addressing. I think we've done a subnetting question or two every so often, but it's not something that is an inherent part of the exam. Now, if we were doing a Cisco CCENT or a Cisco CCNA routing and switching study group right now, we'd be spending all of our time subnetting because it is extensive. You have to be able to know what a network address, a broadcast address, and usable host addresses are for a particular subnet, and you need to be able to calculate that in about 10 seconds or better. It's because there's a lot of other things you have to apply. There are some questions on the Cisco exam where you might have to determine subnets, 7 or 8 different calculations of those subnets. So you would need to know for 7 or 8 different IP address ranges or subnets that have been given to you what the host address, what the network addresses, the broadcast addresses, and the usable host addresses are for all 8 or 9 of those that were given on that question. It's important. I give you a basic overview in my videos where I step you through the math that's behind it. But when you get into doing things with Cisco, there are some shortcuts and other pieces that help. One of these days, I'm going to do a video that is really everything you would ever need to know about IP subnetting. And I literally have an outline of it already written, and even some video pages already written. I've just never sat in front of the camera. It's extremely important. The reason that the Cisco exams really get onto about subnetting is because it's incredibly important when you're working with IP networks. It's everything you do. If you set up a switch, a router, a firewall, you set firewall rules, you configure router settings, you set up routes, you set up routing protocols, you have to know subnetting cold. And it's hard. Subnetting is kind of hard because there's a lot of math. You got to remember a lot of things. You have to know what goes where, that thing in your head. And it does become a little bit of a challenge in knowing those pieces. So make sure you go through and know subnetting for your Network Plus, but know that you might get a question on it. You might get 2. You might not even get 3. You may get 0. There have been people that have they've inappropriately told me, because this is a violation of the CompTIA candidate agreement, but they've said, I didn't get any subnetting questions at all. And I studied a lot for subnetting. But you have to study based on the amount of depth and discussion and percentages that you'll see in the exam objectives. So make sure you know that as well. Let's have a look. Other questions coming through. So through your college, you've taken a class for Security Plus, a class for Linux Plus. Which of these should you try to certify for first? Are these both exams that will renew my A+? Does it matter which one you take first? It doesn't matter which one you take first, but only the Security Plus will count towards a renewal for your A+. The Linux Plus does not. Last I checked, if you ever wanted to see it, type in CompTIA renewal. If you can type it better than me, you'll be doing pretty good. And the CompTIA renewal, that's not the page. This is the page. How to renew your continuing education. Here's the page on the CompTIA website. How to renew. I can see they've done nothing lately to make this easier. So you really have to read through everything that's here. And then they have in here renew with higher level CompTIA certification. You have to go through a link there that takes you to another page that shows you that A+, Network Plus renews A+, Security Plus renews Network Plus and A+, and CASP, the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, renews Security Plus, Network Plus, and A+. That's it, I think. So if we click A+, there we go. Network Plus, Security Plus. That's exactly what I just said. I don't know why I just clicked that, because it tells you on the screen. You can get partial by doing these others. Notice Linux Plus is not listed in partial credit towards any of these certifications, so that doesn't help either. So unfortunately, that doesn't really help you much at all with these pieces, because Linux Plus doesn't help you at all. Although Linux Plus is a great certification, and I think it's important to know, especially if you're working with Linux. It's a very comprehensive exam. It's 2 exams. It's extremely comprehensive. There is a lot in your Linux Plus that you will need to know, and you are learning some really good stuff with Linux. It just doesn't apply towards any of the other CompTIA exams that you would know. And there's probably a number of reasons why they do that. One is that the Linux Plus exam is one that is licensed through LPIC. As you can see, they call it powered by LPIC because it's LPIC's exam. And CompTIA just licenses it, stick the CompTIA name on it, and say, we think this is great, and we should also provide it. And I think it's one of the reasons the CompTIA exams become so popular, quite honestly. So what would you have to know as far as SNMP management software? Well, I do have a video that talks about SNMP. It really talks about what SNMP does and how it operates, and it's kind of really all you would have to know. The details of what you would ever need to know are in the exam objectives. I'm going to pull up the exam objectives so we can see it. Before my voice goes out, let's have a look. Exam objectives. I've got the old version here that's got the old text, the old comfortable text on here. It's the older version. There's a prettier version. They prettied it up that I could probably find a better picture of so this doesn't confuse people. CompTIA N10006. File type, :PDF. See if it gets me there. They've been catching on over at CompTIA, making it harder to simply link directly to the PDF. Now it looks like this. See how pretty it is? It's just more difficult to follow on the screen. So this tells you everything you need to know about everything. So SNMP, here it is, SNMP management software. You need to understand, given a scenario, use appropriate monitoring tools. So you have to know what these tools are and how they would work. SNMP management software, I have to know what a trap is. I have to know what an SNMP get is. I have to know what an SNMP walk is. And I have to know what SNMP MIBs are. That's what you need to know. So don't overthink it. Do I need to install some SNMP management software and connect it and list out all the switches and routers and firewalls that I have, begin gathering SNMP statistics and set up some traps in there and have it send the traps to the alarm manager that I'm using and do an SNMP walk of that device and configure any of the MIBs? Well, it would help, but you don't have to. You just have to know what those are in that list. And as long as you know what's in that list, you're in really good shape in being able to work through this. Is any of this on the A+ networking section? There's a little bit of overlap between what's on the A+ exam and on the Network Plus exam. There used to be more overlap, but the A+ exam has changed itself recently. There's a new version that came out on December the 15th of last year, so it hasn't been out but a number of months now. That version of the A+ exam changed the networking section quite a bit. There used to be even some subnetting information on the A+, not there anymore. The A+ exam with networking now focuses really on what the end user who's working on an operating system needs to know about the network. How do I configure an IP address? What is a subnet mask? What is a default gateway? What is DNS? What is DHCP? What happens when DHCP doesn't work? That's kind of the focus of A+. Obviously, with Network Plus, you're the network administrator. You need to know how to do all of these administration pieces. So that's something that's very different on the A+ versus the Network Plus now. Used to be a lot more overlap, not so much anymore. Yeah, CASP is relatively new. We saw the CASP exam here at the top of the list. The folks at CompTIA realized that security is becoming remarkably popular And they said, well, we don't have we got Security Plus, but we need a higher level exam to compete with the ISC squared of the world, with their CISSP. We need to compete with some of the other security exams that are out there, like the Certified Ethical Hacker. That is a challenge to compete with because the name sounds so good. So they created their own, the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, which is a higher level security exam. Like anything else, the rest of the industry now needs to realize that it exists and needs to ask for it, because if people aren't asking for it to hire you, then why do you need to get it? That's kind of the challenge that CompTIA has with anything, I guess, is that they have to market it so that other people will want to have that certification. And there are a number of people that have. I think the U.S. federal government, for instance, in the United States, have certainly embraced the CASP. And so more and more people tend to be asking for it these days. If you take Security Plus to renew the A+, could you then go back and do the Network Plus to renew, or do they have to be done in the order on the website? They don't have to be done in this order that's on the CompTIA website. But if you have the Security Plus, see if I got your scenario right, you've already taken the A+, and you take the Security Plus, that will renew your A+. If you then take the Network Plus, that will probably renew your A+ at that point, but it won't do anything with Security Plus. So you may have two different dates you're working at that point. You have the date that you passed your Network Plus, that now your Network Plus and A+ are certified at, but Security Plus would obviously certify all three. So if you were going to take all three in that order, A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus helps from a renewal perspective. Ultimately, take the one that's going to get you the job. Take the one that's going to move you furthest along with your personal goals. Don't worry about CompTIA's renewal stuff. Take the one that is going to get you a better job, get you a new job, get you the thing you're looking to do. Or maybe you're just trying to get more knowledge in the industry. Maybe there's nothing more specific like that, but that's certainly something you can consider doing as well, is doing them in that order. The renewal process is a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of a thing to keep up with. This is one where CompTIA has done a pretty good job on their website of describing the renewal process. It's just a lot to read through and negotiate. But once you got it, I think it's pretty easy to step through those pieces and work through those. It's just one of those things you have to think about, because all of these certifications now expire in 3 years. It's just something you really can't change in the industry. And that's because it's now an international standard that primarily governments are focusing on. They want all of the things that they do to be based on these international standards, and the international standards for certifications require that these certifications be constantly renewed. It doesn't set a specific time, but it does give you at least, everybody seems to go about 3 years. I think that's the way it works for those pieces. So very common to run into that. I think that's something you should always look at when you're looking at certification. There are a number of questions that I get on the Network Plus certification that people are sending in. Let's pull up some of those. There is a couple of things that people always go back to. Even folks were talking about this in the chat room earlier, with not just the being able to subnet, but one of the big ones was the OSI model. Everybody gets kind of tripped up on the OSI model because it's a model. It's not like a thing you can touch. You can't configure it. And it's something that if you've never been involved with networking, the OSI model is something you would have never run into before. And the only thing I can really say about that, and I mentioned this last week in the after show, because I think it applies there. That was the A+ study group, but we're really talking more networking, is get a very good protocol analyzer. And if you've never been out to Wireshark.org, you should go out to Wireshark.org and download Wireshark. It's an absolutely free open source protocol analyzer, and it is remarkable. Just download it and install it onto your computer. There's also some great books. They put on here some great books, things like Troubleshooting with Wireshark from Laura Chappell, who's an amazing presenter and author. If you ever have a chance to see her or read her stuff, make sure you do that. Download Wireshark, install it onto your computer, and run some packet captures. It puts the OSI model in these neat layers. It really shows you the different layers. You can see the physical information coming through and how it built the frame. You can see the MAC addresses at layer 2. You can see the IP addresses at layer 3. You can see the TCP or UDP port numbers at layer 4. You can see the application traffic at layer 7. And the more you know about doing protocol analysis, the better a network administrator you're going to be, because you can now solve any problem that happens. Even if it's a problem with the application or problem with the network, you'll know exactly where the problem is and you'll be able to fix it because you now know how to do all of these packet captures using a protocol analyzer. It is a remarkable tool that does not just packet captures, it can do SSL decryption. It can take Steve in the chat room is using it right now in his lab because he's doing voice over IP. It can take a voice over IP stream, put it back together, and play it so you can hear what was going across your voice over IP. Oh, creepy, huh? But that's what you are able to do with the packets going across the network. It can take traffic that went back and forth to a web server and reconstruct the web page and show it to you. It can look at a telnet session or another type of communication and put all of the text back together and show you what happened during that session. It can show you response times between the network components, between the network and the server. It can show if there's retransmissions. It can help you understand how much traffic was transferred. It can help you understand the delays that were occurring on the application server, and the client sitting here going, the network is slow. Actually, no, it takes 10 seconds for the server to ever respond to you. All of this is in your protocol analyzer. And Wireshark is, I grew up with the Sniffer, which was a product from Network General. But Wireshark is really, because it's free and available, what I think most people use these days. And there's some really nice graphing, some nice color coding, some great expert analysis built into this. Very well. It doesn't come out bad. It actually works pretty well. Now, Steve is saying that, well, the reconstruction of voice, don't like it. The problem, though, with voice over IP, the problem and the great thing about voice over IP is that every implementation of voice over IP from a manufacturer is different than every other manufacturer. Voice over IP has some standards associated with it. H323, SIP, H248. It has a standard format for doing a lot of things. There's a lot of voice over IP that's not standardized. It's just outside the standard, and everybody kind of tweaks it for their own. So you get into these scenarios where something that works well with a Cisco environment will not work well with another manufacturer's environment. And that becomes a little more of a challenge with voice over IP. I think that's why voice over IP people who manage voice over IP systems, they get paid really well. And I just think that's because they have to pay for a therapist. They have to take that extra money and apply it to their sanity, because voice over IP is crazy. I would never get involved with voice over IP because I'm not that person. I couldn't handle it. It takes a very special person to manage these voice over IP environments. And it's not me. I admit it. I couldn't handle it. I probably could to a point, and then I'd have to quit and just run through the hallways screaming. Not what I want to do for a job. For what else? I'll be right here. As long as you keep watching videos, I'll keep making them because it is a little bit of a challenge to work through those pieces. There is also a lot of questions that I get about not just MAC addresses, not just the other pieces relating to the OSI model, but a lot of questions about the performance-based questions. And if you have never stepped through what CompTIA calls a performance-based question, you need to do this. On CompTIA's channel on YouTube, let me find the video that they have available that I think describes it pretty well. It's called Taking a CompTIA Exam. It has horrible music. We'll turn that down. There we go.
CompTIA exam.
The CompTIA exam. So this CompTIA exam experience, they tell you before you walk into the room what you can expect to see on the exam. And I'm going to speed this up by a factor of 2. So you're going to see these things really zip through. They really show you what's on the screen. They give you a feel for what you might expect to see during the exam itself, what the different things are you would click on the screen to manage the process. Here's your clock. You might get a calculator. You probably won't on the Network Plus exam. There's an option to flag the questions for review. And then they step through in this video what all of the different questions are that you might be asked. So they'll tell you, well, here is multiple choice and what you would commonly see on a multiple choice test. You might get some that require multiple responses. They look a little bit different. You might be asked for fill in the blank or matching or drag and drop. Those are all performance-based questions in the CompTIA world. Although in this video, they tend to call a performance-based question one that is command line, but that's not entirely true in the CompTIA world. Anything that is not multiple choice is performance-based. So make sure you think about that and walk through that when you're looking at the CompTIA exam, or if you've never walked into a CompTIA exam, you want to know what does this look like on the screen. It's a really good video that shows you how you would break through and see all of those different pieces on the CompTIA exam. So you can find that on the on YouTube, I guess, /CompTIA, whatever their channel name. Their channel name, I think, is just CompTIA. And that will, let me see if I can click on that. Oh, of course, they didn't set a channel name. Their channel name is channel/UC3KFMMXZ3LD. Well, you can just type it in. On the name of that video on the CompTIA channel on YouTube and be able to, this is called Taking a CompTIA Exam. Just search for that on the YouTubes and you'll be able to step through that. I think that is an important thing to go through to help you understand that, the performance-based questions aren't as bad as what I think they are. They're really going back and asking you questions about what you know relating to the CompTIA exam objectives. So if you know that, you're going to do fine. You're going to do fine. Well, with that, we've come to the end of another study group. We've got so much that we went through this month. Remember that the next study group, when is it? I don't know when my next study group is. It is June the 15th. That's when it is. So if you want to do another Network Plus study group, just wait till next month. And if you want your question handled or seen on the study group, you can always send me a recommendation. Click the Contact Us link at the bottom or the top of the Professor Messer website and just tell me what you think, or do it in the chat room to be able to do that. We can ask those questions at the study groups and go to the calendar and you can find out when the next study group might be. Other than that, we've kind of come to the end of yet another study group for the month. I want to thank everybody for joining. Thanks for your contributions throughout the month. Thanks for your support through the purchase of my video courses and the course notes. I would not be able to do this without you, and I really am grateful for that. Really couldn't ask for a better job. And it's all thanks to you. We'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks for joining us, everyone. See you then.